Hello, I hope you all are doing so well. Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to share a couple of things around what I've been feeling is going on. There's a massive, what felt like to me a massive wave of energy that came in last week, or that I felt move through me last week, which has led to some very powerful realizations about myself, about what it means to be a human here on this planet right now. And it comes on the heels of some really, really dark weeks for me. What felt like, I really can only describe as feeling like I was stuck in a box, you know? Everything felt flat and gray. And one of the things that I always, I realize now that I took for granted, which maybe this is a part of who we are as beings that are always able to access this internal core of our light, right? The truth of who we are, our essence. I started to realize I had really taken that for granted, because in my life, this is all retrospective, right? Now, I realized that no matter what situation I was in, no matter how dark circumstances seemed, no matter how much felt like it was working against me, I was always able to put myself in a better feeling place. I was always able to stay positive, or at least find something to be positive about. And it wasn't really a thought process, right? As much as a feeling that would come over me. And yeah, sometimes I had to get in my car and go for a long drive, or go for a walk in nature, or, you know, kind of scour through and try to find a meditation or something that resonated with me, right? But it wasn't that difficult in the grand scheme of things. It you know, sometimes if I was having a really low day, it would take hours, which I suppose seems like a lot, but not when you compare it to weeks and weeks and months and maybe even a lifetime of really experiencing this gray stagnation. I realize this is kind of a superpower, I suppose, that we have, right? This ability to, no matter what the physical outward world looks like, to find that hope, to find that joy, to find this peace inside. And it really is something that I did not realize I was actively doing until I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. And that was really, really, really scary, because I wandered through these last few weeks wondering, well, what was that? Was I actually physically affecting my brain, causing it to create some kind of chemical that made me feel better? Was it some kind of an internal addiction I have to, you know, I ran the gamut of like, is that just a form of procrastination? Like procrastinating on doing physical things gave me this surge of better feeling energy, right? Almost like an addiction, right? I mean, there's so many ways that we can cause ourselves to stay in this avoidance of who we are. Addiction takes so many forms. That's a whole other subject. But at any rate, it was a very long, dreary, well, it was probably more months, probably about 2 months, you know, but the last 2 or 3 weeks was where I was like finally realizing, hey, this is not moving, this is not lifting, I don't know what this is. And it was, like I said, it was incredibly scary. So last, Thursday, I had gone to a meditation and I was sitting in the car talking with someone, and I realized I felt completely hopeless. And it wasn't so much that I felt hopeless that was troubling me. It was, well, when I felt this way in the past, how did I get out of it? What was I using to get myself out of that place, right? Again, almost questioning, like, was I covering something up and getting out of that hopeless place? Or was I doing something in a healthy way that was helping me to overcome that sense of hopelessness? And as I'm talking about it now, I'm almost realizing, no, this whole time There's been enough things that I could focus on to avoid this very dark thing inside of me, right? This place inside of me that actually does feel completely hopeless. And maybe, you know, I'm sure there are others of you too that have been going through this, because it came to the point where I just didn't even care. It's like the bills would come in and I'm like, I don't care, paying another bill, what's it gonna get me? Like, what, you know, I've done this before, I've pulled myself out of places, and has it really served me? Like, has it made life better, right? I've put a lot of effort into a lot of things over my lifetime, only to find I've still ended up here. Like, what's the point? Except that in this energy that moved through me last week, and that's exactly what I was feeling in that moment. It was like, yeah, I feel like, what's the point of going on? What's the point of getting up for another day of feeling this? Even when, yeah, there are things, and I can even see the things that in the past had brought me joy, in the past were really inspiring. It's like, so what? So what if I experience it momentarily? There's still this other thing here that I'm feeling that I come back to. What's the point? What's the point of cycling in and out of this gray darkness, right? This kind of apathetic experience. I just didn't really understand the point. Yeah, I can lift myself up. Yeah, I can make myself feel better. Yeah, I can be happy. Maybe I'm just appearing to be happy. I don't really know, right? And in that moment of just realizing, wow, there is so much inside of me that is so unhappy, that just doesn't know what to do. And I can't fight it anymore. That was the thing, right? I have exhausted every kind of mental thought process around it, all of my cognitive processes around it. Okay, how do I get myself out of this? How do I unfeel this? How do I focus on something else? I had run the gamut, at least as far as I know, right? Which means I've exhausted my own kind of mental patterning that kept me safe from feeling this. And I just couldn't do anymore. And I could feel this fear and this grief like a wave rushing towards me, right? Rushing towards the shore. And I felt like the shore, and I could feel the incoming wave, almost like a tsunami that was going to overtake me. And I was horrified. And yet I was sitting in the car, kind of trying to explain to someone, just, I don't know anymore. And I felt the emotion, you know, move over me. And it was so powerful. It was like surging up from inside of me. But then in the next moment, it was like it passed. It was over. And I realized what I was really afraid of was feeling the fear, was feeling the helplessness, was feeling whatever emotion it was that was trying to move through me. And in my resistance to feeling that, I was creating this structure and this contrast. Well, what I was going to say, a construct. I suppose it was experiencing the contrast of it, right? But I was creating this cage around me so that I wouldn't let in that feeling and that emotion. And yet that created even more pain, right? Because those waves don't ever stop. The waves of humanness don't ever stop moving through us. Those feelings, those emotions are always present because it's a part of being alive. It's a part of being a cellular being. And yet the greatest pain and suffering comes from believing that we have to stop those waves, that we have to fully understand those waves before we can let them through us, that we have to be able to outsmart the wave or have some kind of barrier wall that will push the wave back out of our experience. And yet, being a human is about being the vessel through which those waves can be expressed and experienced. I was having a conversation with my kids the other day, and somehow this whole conversation came up about being a spirit or being in a human body. And my daughter said something along the lines of like, yeah, but chocolate, but coffee. And I thought, you're right. Like, I could be a spirit on this earth, right? A disembodied spirit, or just a spirit that whatever isn't in a human form, a soul, right? Wandering or whatever. Because at the time, that's what seemed better to me. Like, being in the human body is so painful. It's so painful to feel these emotions. And yet, how much we would lose out on, right? Just the senses, being able to feel things soft or rough, you know, that caress on the cheek, that hug, all these different foods that we can taste, and then the different sensations that even creates inside of our body. It's a whole other range. We are a world unto our own selves. And we get to feel all of these things, and we get to have the experience of those things, and we get to define what those experiences mean for us. I've always said we are our own planetary body, right? I see each individual human as a planet, as its own self, right? It has its own environment, it has its own weather, it has its own ecosystem. And yet we think we have to somehow match this outer world, this outer planet. We have to somehow fit into it. We have to somehow become a part of it, or only a part of it, so we separate from it, from the greater experience of the whole. And that's just not true. What I realized in that moment is I didn't have a choice, right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, I allowed this way. No, I was terrified of it. I could feel it coming. I felt in that moment like I was just going to die. And in my own inability to express what was happening to me, because I tend to pride myself on, you know, knowing a few things here and there, especially when it comes to, you know, emotions and spirituality. But in that moment, I was frozen. I was petrified, and I had no answer. And in this feeling of being next to someone and not being able to communicate what I was going through, that was horrific to me. Not being able to have an explanation for what was going on inside of me. And I'm supposed to know the answers. I'm supposed to have the answers. I'm supposed to be able to communicate and explain it. And yet I couldn't. In that one moment, right, the seed of everything that I want to be, I was none of it. And then it burst through me. And I realized I didn't die. I wasn't less or more of who I was the moment before. In feeling that wave of that, was it death? I don't know, move right through me, and realizing I didn't die, and realizing I don't have to be afraid of my own emotions. I realized what's always present inside of me is this enormous love. We are all love at our core, right? And it's just a matter of opening and closing these windows and doors to love, to receiving and giving love, right? That's what defines us in our human experience. And yet it's always available. And this is what I realized after that experience was love is always there. It never goes away. It is who we are. Are we choosing to know that, choosing to see that, and choosing to be that? Or are we choosing to have a different experience? And sometimes we don't know yet, right? Sometimes we can't feel or understand this. And so it's not like we're really consciously choosing. But somewhere inside of us, there's still something that's unresolved. And I always say if we're struggling with something, it doesn't mean that we're doing it wrong. It just means that we don't have the answers yet. There's something else we still have to learn or experience in order to fully open up to the truth that's inside of us, right? So after this wave had passed through the next day, I realized that there's nothing to fear because I am this container for all of this to happen, for this to be the experience of all of the emotions and all of the fears and all of the anger and all of the sadness and all of the grief and all of the joy and all of the participation. and the greater experiences of this life. We don't have to limit ourselves. We don't have to be afraid of what we don't know. In fact, that is what is so divine about being human, is that it is in our genes and it is in our DNA to transform and to, we could call it whatever these fancy names we want to say, right? Alchemize, transmute, transfigure. It's a part of the cell structure itself to change, to be touched by something, and to move because of that experience. You know, I've always said, like, this is what I think today, tomorrow it will be different. And I have the right to change my mind, but I'm not changing my mind because, well, now it doesn't work for me. I'm changing my mind because I've had a different experience in it. And that is what growth is. That is what, well, spiritual enlightenment is, right? And this is really the problem, I think, that we're experiencing, which is, especially within the spiritual community, we think the goal is spiritual enlightenment, and we think we're going to transcend the human experience, when really it's all about the human experience now. And it's about getting past that expectation that we are going to have it all figured out, that we are never going to have a negative emotion, and to connect based on that now, beyond this concept of spiritual enlightenment means I'm safe. Spiritual enlightenment means I figured it out. Spiritual enlightenment means I'm on top of a mountain and no one can touch me. And it's time that we come down from these safe places. These places that we have built, these temples that we have built to keep us safe, right? These are just other constructs of experiences that we are afraid to have. I had this thought the other day that, you know, we can divide ourselves in groups based on our sameness. We can divide ourselves into groups based on our differences. We divide ourselves from the larger group based on our difference from that larger group, which is basically still the same thing. It's the same difference, right? It is what is same about us. We connect with others based on what we find similar. We say, oh, what resonates, right? And we congregate according to that. And yet, that is still a form of separation. And it's really not until humanity recognizes that we can congregate and come together based on our differences, and this is what makes us whole. This is what allows us to start seeing our wholeness. And we see all of this through our interaction with the external, right? But really, it's about resolving what's in here. You know, this concept of, well, I call it distortion. Other people might say shadow work. Other people might call it demons. And I've been through all of those experiences, right? There was a point in my life where I didn't believe in anything really except love and the greater good of humanity. And then things started to break down in my life, right? And then I got caught up in these kind of different ideas and ways of thinking, which my experience was kind of in the New Age spiritual community. And then I thought, wow, have I just been really naive? Like, maybe there are demons and dark forces at work and negative energies. And then I really started to feel into that. And it really almost became a reality for me. But again, retrospectively, on the other side of it, now I realize, well, we all go through this, whether it's religion, spirituality, our careers, and our families, right? We're trying to understand ultimately what's going on inside of us. And so it's easier to separate from it in order to see the story of what's going on inside of us by looking at it in the context of something external to us, which means archetypes or hierarchies or demons, right? At the end of the day, it's just about this shadow or this distortion or this structure inside of us that is unresolved. And I think this is where a lot of people are stuck right now, because if we, just from my own personal experience of what I've been through, right? It's about, okay, negative energies. There are negative off-planet things which are trying to control us. Honestly, that may or may not be true. And for a time, I think it helped me to think that and to believe that so that I could dig deeper inside of myself. I didn't realize this is what I was doing, right? But this is what it allowed me to do. It allowed me to believe there was something outside of me that was controlling my experience, or that was keeping me from experiencing more joy and more love and more harmony and more communion. And for a while it served me, and for a while it made sense. But it's kind of still a form of, well, I suppose archetypes is the best way to understand it, right? And I've even if you look at my work, right, I talk about the wounded mother. And sometimes it felt like something that was happening to me through someone else. It was someone else's dark mother, right, pressing in on me. And sometimes it very much felt like I held it inside of me, that it was living within me. And I think both are true, right? Because we all hold all of these things, these different shadows, these different parts of ourselves that we don't fully understand. That's really all the shadow is, right? Or that's really all distortion is. It's something living inside of us, a part of the human experience, but we all hold it inside of us. We can't not, because we are in this planet and we are in this world, right? And that's kind of part of what I've learned to understand. Whatever I think is out there beyond me is also within me. And I think there have been several pivotal moments in my experience over these last few months. And one of them was when I was having a lot of problems in my relationship. And I was really angry and frustrated. And just because I was going through these loops of anxiety, right? And I was trying to understand what was triggering this anxiety within me that was ultimately making me, well, it was the way I was trying to understand it, right? The only way I knew really to go about it was, okay, I'm getting triggered. There's something that you're doing that's triggering me. Okay, there's something about the situation that happens continuously between us that's bringing up something that I don't understand. Like, I'm trying to understand it, right? But I'm having the same reaction. And I'm just feeling so much emotional pain. And in the process, I'm hurting you, which is just hurting the world, right? Because then I'm angry and then I'm taking it out, even if it's not intentional. It's like I'm feeling this negative emotion. I'm feeling this sadness and this grief. And everywhere I go, I'm just oozing grief and sadness. The cashier, my children, my car, whatever, right? We don't exist in isolation, even though we feel like that's the best way sometimes to be. We feel like that's the safer way to be. But there was a moment where I stood in front of the mirror and I said, well, whether I want to call it dark mother or distortion or a demon, the truth is that it is coming up from within me. I am the one who is saying these hurtful words. I am the one that is in pain and I am confused. And this is becoming my expression. Even though I'm trying to resolve it, it's still coming from me. And I have to figure this out. And that was a very, very pivotal moment. I can, what's the expression? I can call it dark mother, right? I can say it's something external to me. It removes a layer of responsibility from me to say, well, it's a demon or it's dark mother energy, right? It's negative off-planetary weaponry trying to control me, targeting me, frying my brain, whatever. But I realized none of that really mattered. What I wanted was to be in a healthy relationship. I didn't want to feel the emotional pain of what was happening. And this wasn't necessarily a conscious choice or a conscious direction that I turned or oh, suddenly I know how to handle this better. It wasn't that at all. But it was in that moment of crying out and saying, I don't want to be in this kind of pain anymore. Whatever it is, I can't blame you. I can't blame me. I can't blame the world. I can't blame our relationship. I can't blame our parents for raising us the way they raised us that made these wounded interactions anymore. I just know I don't want to be in pain. And I suppose in that moment, what I was really doing was taking responsibility for myself and responsibility for what I was feeling and responsibility for the way that I was handling it. And I think as this started to unfold over the course of the last month or so, what I've come to realize is, look, humanity is on the brink of something really, really spectacular. And we're fighting with it right now. And we're trying to figure out how to disentangle from this. And one of my biggest struggles, especially with my work, right, is it really serving something greater? Or is this very selfish? Or am I just helping people feel better in the midst of their own pain and suffering momentarily, right? Like, what am I really doing? Should I be out there trying to make the world a better place? But I've always said, like, this has always felt true to me, is that it's not about making the world a better place. It's about making ourselves a better place. It's about looking at ourselves, and this is how it feels to me. We are Gaia. Gaia is not out there. We are this. The planetary body is also the same as our own individual human body. We have to fix. It's not really about fixing, right? We have to understand. We have to open up to this understanding. What is this pain inside of me? What is it wanting? What is not being heard? What is being avoided here? We have to do that internally. And until it's done internally, connecting with others isn't going to matter. Because what I see is that where we keep trying to isolate, either on our own or with groups of people, where we have a sameness with them, we are actually isolating and grouping together in places where we are still wounded. And then we can look at the greater scope and say, okay, well, we have this community here and everything out there is wrong, but we're going to make it okay in here. And yet what is binding us together? It's these unrealized wounds. And it's not until we can say deeply from inside of ourselves that actually we're all having this same experience. We're all just trying to feel better. At the end of the day, we all just want love. We all just want to be loved. And that's what's inside of us. And yet what is keeping us from feeling that? What is keeping us from giving love and receiving love fully? What is it? Those are the things we have to figure out inside of our own selves. And it's not until we do, because then we'll have developed such a deep level of love and compassion for our own selves. We can't help but understand why we couldn't feel it in the first place. And then we'll look at everyone else and say, we understand. Maybe they're not there yet, but we understand why they're not there yet. We understand how they're not there yet. And we can have compassion for them as well as ourselves, because there will always be things, right? As the world evolves, there will be more and more things to reconcile. But yet we'll understand not to fear the wave of reconciliation. And we'll understand that that's what being human actually means. That these things move through us, but we can make sense of them. We can honor them. And we can choose to be this way. People talk about the evolution of humanity, but I'm not quite sure those are the right words to use, because maybe this isn't the true meaning of the word, but there's something implied in evolution that we have to wait, that it takes time, that we have to wait for something to be triggered. And yet, to me, it's more about evolving. It's our evolvement or our involvement in this process, choosing to become better, choosing to become more enlightened, choosing to become more aware of what is really happening inside of us when we feel angry or sad or when we're grieving, and opening up to new ideas around those things, because we're so daunted by those structures and systems of the past, right? It's this inner evolvement, but this inner involvement, being involved in our inner world, that is really going to bring us over the edge of where we find ourselves right now. And so when we can start to connect with others based on that variety within us, that's when we can start to feel whole again, right? And yet, it's a very personal process. There's a point that we have to reach inside of ourselves, this understanding, before we can start to connect with others in this way. As I said, right now we're still connecting based on dividing ourselves. Whether we think we're dividing in a helpful way or a harmonious way, my suspicion is that we're really not. We're dividing in a way that feels safe to us. There's one other thought I wanted to express around this, but it seems to have escaped me. You know, my relationship has been a very powerful, potent container for shifting some of these core, they feel like points of density, right? But this is this kind of distortion. I realize the work that I do in the light language and these kind of, you know, transmissions, and we have all these different words we've assigned to them, right? Transmissions, attunements, healing. What I really do, and I fought this for so long, right? I kept thinking, all right, I want to get past looking at the distortion. I want to get past looking at all this negativity. I want to get past feeling this. Every time I would go into the energy field, I would continue to find more of this, right? And I thought, when does it end? It never ends. Okay, we have to stop saying we need to heal. We don't really need to heal. We just need to be in this world. And yet what I realized is, this is what I tap into, right? It's a stagnation, this energy. It's an anchor. We find it in our own selves, but we find that it gets passed on through our ancestry, through our lineage, right? Like the way that my parents behaved and raised me, this is what I took on. I didn't know any different, right? This is the weather system or the environment in which I grew up in. And I just naturally adopted it and became this. Even though all along I felt something else inside of me, and I've always felt like I wrestled with that. And that's what caused me so much pain, right? Feeling this love, feeling this expansion, this emotion, but there was nowhere to put it. There was nobody to receive it, and there was really no one to reflect it back to me. But this is what we become. And it's only in the midst of almost being tied down in this relationship. It came through in a very weird way where I struggled with, look, I don't want to be alone in life. Just feeling this, okay, all of a sudden there's all this activity around me. Part of what I struggle with, right? Like, just leave me alone. I want to be isolated with my thoughts and feelings. And that's exactly what my relationship showed me of, I really don't want to be alone. Like, I really want to have someone in my life. I really want to feel and experience love. And yet it felt very unsafe. And it felt so messy and confusing. And at some point I thought, maybe I just can't do relationship. Maybe I'm just not meant to do relationship. Because all that happens is I start feeling all of this awfulness. It's almost like I'm so focused on the pain and suffering that that's all I kept getting, right? And so I thought, well, maybe I just have it all wrong. There are all these structures and systems we have created in the world to try to understand these things, right? So we are raised through wounding because our parents haven't resolved their wounding, right? Our parents have not recognized the core of who they truly are. That they are love, that's all they really are. That they had things passed on to them from their parents and of course from society, right? And we keep passing this on. We keep becoming this. We keep becoming greater and greater structures of wounding. We keep trying to understand it. I mean, I like to look at, you know, the psychological or mental health community. It's like, I always say, diagnoses, things we like to label ourselves with, they're just observed patterns of behavior. And there's enough of it that we can now lump it together and call it something. And then we call ourselves these things, these dysfunctions, and we identify as it. And it's like, no, we are not that. It's the same thing. It's the shadow that we don't want to look at, right? It's the thing and it's not that we don't necessarily even want to look at it. We don't know how to resolve it. So we keep going external, and we are creating wider and greater systems and structures and frameworks and archetypes now. They're not just about what's inside the human now, it's about what's inside of society, right? Society now has its own structural archetypes. We're trying to understand ourselves through that, right? I'm spiritual. I'm enlightened. No, you're not. If we have to call ourselves that, we're not actually that. Because at the end of the day, we are all of it. And we are just a unique expression of all of it. That's what makes us different. We have a very unique combination, as we say about DNA, right? That's what we are. We're a unique combination of the all. There is nothing better or worse about any of us. There is nothing more profound or more asleep than any of us. We're all doing it at the same time, in different ways, at different rates. And I just want to reiterate again, we are at a very, very potent point in our history. I was thinking about this today. Did you ever think you would hear a man say, "Don't tell me what to do with my body"? Wow. We can look at everything that's happening in the world and we can take it at face value and we can say we're being attacked and controlled and whatever. Or, the other half of humanity is trying to kill us because they won't get on board with the program. But in many ways, what's going on right now is showing us how we are so much more alike than we think. It's just that we may not have had those certain experiences that allowed us to communicate it, right? And now we're having all kinds of experiences. It's like our body, our world, we own this. We own this experience. And what will we make of it? How will we define it? And it's funny to me because I'll just use this experience right now, right? That some people think it's safer and more helpful. No, how do I want to say this? What's going on in the world at the end of the day is really the fear, right? It's the fear of something growing in the body, which we believe is not supposed to be there. Or it's the fear of putting something else into the body, which we believe shouldn't be put there, and that we have no control over. But it's really the same thing. It's really this sense that I am afraid that I have no control over my reality. What happens in our life is what happens in our life. How are we choosing to define it? And the way that someone is choosing to define it may not make sense for us, and that's okay. I was driving the other day, and the sun was starting to set, and so the lighting was interesting and really quite beautiful. But I was driving up over this very high bridge, and as these cars are going up and the sun is starting to come over and I'm starting to see these shadows. And there was a man who was running up this bridge as well. And yet, because of the light, he was basically showing up as just a shadow, right? Like he was all, I couldn't see him clearly because the light was coming from essentially behind his figure, but to his front, right? Because we were all facing the light here. And I thought, you know, this is such a great representation for life. It's like, I'm in a car, I'm driving, and I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, well, I could look at him and say, you know, that's really dumb. Why are you running? That's going to take you so much longer to get where you're going. And it's so much more comfortable in here where I can control the climate. I can control the speed to a certain degree, right? And I thought, yeah, but the difference is the purpose. We could actually be going to the same location. I don't know. But my purpose for going there and his purpose for going there are completely different. And the only reason that I think that I might be wrong and he might be right, or he might be wrong and I might be right about the way we're going, is because I don't know what he's thinking around his experience. I don't know his purpose for his experience. This is the difference between us. This is what makes us different. We have different reasons for doing what we are doing. And sometimes this is where we kind of cross these boundaries of feeling, maybe our egos get in the way, right? We think, well, you don't even know your internal reason for going where you're going. That savior complex, right? I know better. I know more. Therefore, you know less about why you're going the way you're going than I know about why you're going the way you're going. But yet, if we take a step back, we realize, first of all, it's none of my business why he's going the way he's going. And if I understood why I'm going the way I'm going, I would actually have a better understanding and a better space to know that he's going for his own way. He's going in his own way, because that best serves where he's going and why he's going there for him. You know, have you ever been in traffic? It's like, I realize, like, I've been on both sides, right? I've been the person who is driving calmly, who's not in a hurry, and I see somebody cut in front of me or do something that I deem as stupid, and I just shake my head as if I'm better than them, right? But I've also been the person who is running behind, who is late, who, oh my God, if I miss this exit, this is going to screw up my entire schedule, right? And I have children who are waiting for me and people I'm going to let down and all these things, right? And so it's like, oh, I'm sorry, here I go, right? It's like, can we realize we have been on both sides of this, that we are all of this at different points in time? It doesn't make us better or worse than anyone else to be in one position or the other. And so I'll just say again, right? It's not until we realize we actually need to come together in our differences that we will really have made it to this point that we can jump off from. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care. So I realized this often happens after I make these videos. I'm like, oh yeah, I should expand on this a little bit. It almost feels like one of those Marvel movies, right? It's like, stay tuned for the big surprise. Although maybe it's not much of a surprise. But I wanted to reiterate, right, what I've noticed happening, and I see this most clearly in relationship, this failure to communicate properly, right? This breakdown of communication. But this is also what I was talking about when I was describing this man, right, running up this hill, and how I'm perhaps judging, or he's judging how we're going and how we're getting there, right? This is what we're doing in the world too. It's like, well, your decision is wrong and my decision is right. Based on what? Just based on our experiences. And this is the big piece that I realized in my own relationship, which was so painful. These continuous cycles that I was going through, right? I was having these massive waves of anxiety and freaking out and this just complete breakdown, not knowing how to communicate these things. At the end of the day, the way that we were able to move through this and get past this cycle was to step back and say, okay, what do we really want here? At the end of the day, I know that you love me. I know that I love you. And I know that we don't want to spend our lives doing this and feeling these things. And what started to happen was that we had to start to explain ourselves, right? When I got a text message or I heard something over the phone that triggered me, right? Or something was said that made me start to stiffen up, I realized in that moment I had to ask a question. And I had to say, well, what did you mean when you said that? Even though you said these specific words, right? What was the landscape behind that? Because, we use words to say things, right? But they have such potent energy attached to them already, right? We've heard it in the past. We've heard it said in that tone, in that way in the past, or we're making assumptions when someone says, well, I guess I'll just go and do this. We're assuming so many things about that statement, right? What we are really asking people to do is paint me a picture. Describe the landscape. What is going on behind these words, behind this statement? And when we open up to that, right, that's really this inner world. When we say things, we're really just on the outer surface. We're in the membrane of that cell, and we're just kind of doing our best to describe, to communicate. And yet we're leaving out all the important details that actually make us human, right? And leaving out that broader description, that broader environment, that broader painting of the weather that's going on inside of us, right? It's actually a failure to communicate who we actually are and what's really going on inside of us in a way that the other person or party can understand, right? So our communication is very narrow. It's very narrow. And this is why what's so wonderful about even the light language, right, and things like this is that it brings through the entire range of energy. We have to pull pieces out in order to speak it, right, through the language. But it's not the fullness of it all. And you'll find that when you go back and listen to these things, right, that's what I realized. Someone said, oh, these things are alive. I was like, yeah, they are. But it's because it's the whole impression of the energy. What I say and what I communicate through the words is just a very small portion of it, right? Which is why when you go back and listen to it, you can hear different things every time. You're in a different place. You're in a different perspective. You're able to tap in to a different corner of that painting, right? A different color in that painting. This is what is missing from human communication right now and where we're trying to get, right? Which is, okay, even though you wrote these words, or you said this statement, let's take a pause and now describe to me what you're feeling, right? So often we say things, we shame people about this too, right? We say, oh, you're oversharing. Oh, you don't know how to censor yourself. Oh, you don't know how to communicate clearly. You just go off on all these different tangents. What if that's not really true, right? What if that is us trying to describe these deepest, darkest corners inside of us, right? So that you can have a full understanding of where I'm coming from. Because when I said this thing, my last intention was to hurt you. And yet that's often how it's perceived, right? So it's about flipping ourselves inside out, right? When I talked about the kind of like the diagnoses with the mental health, right? These kinds of things where I said it's just observable patterns, and now we've labeled it, and then we call ourselves that, and then we try to figure out how to manage this, right? How do we deal with this? What's so troubling about that is, again, we're just creating these constructs and systems in the external to try to describe what's really going on inside of us. And then we're just bypassing and avoiding what's really going on inside of us anyway, because then we say, oh, it's just my anxiety. Oh, it's just my OCD. No, all of those things, all of these things that we feel, and all of these, let's say, symptoms that we have, right, are all the same thing at the core, which is that we have things that we are feeling inside that we do not know how to communicate. Not only do we not know how to communicate them, sometimes we don't even know that we're feeling them. And even if we are feeling them, we don't realize they are things that we need to be having a conversation with. that there is information and there is messages in there. Where we're perceiving it in a fearful way, there is a gift underneath all of it, right? Every wound has a gift. Every darkness has a seed of light within it that is waiting to be cracked open and planted in fertile soil, right? And what is the fertile soil? It is this inner exchange, yes, between my own feelings and my own self and my own cognitive understanding, but between me and someone else and me and a greater group, right? Exchanging and allowing that flow of information to interact, knowing we're not going to die if we do. We're not going to die if we exchange. We're not going to die if we communicate the depth of our soul to another person. In fact, it's going to help us expand. This is the big fear. This is the big secret, right? Our expansion relies on communicating this inner sanctuary, this inner world that we are, and yet we're so trained to keep it locked up and closed up tightly, right? So that seed never gets planted. The seed never gets fertilized. It stays in that inert shell, right? So when we go to the external to try to describe things like relationship anxiety, right, we're actually doing ourselves a great disservice. I understand it's a way to try and figure out and resolve what's happening in the relationship. But I saw this thing the other day and it really made me sad. There's something now called relationship OCD, relationship obsessive compulsive disorder, right? And so now people are like, oh yeah, I totally have this. I obsess over all these thoughts that I'm having around the relationship and it makes me destroy the relationship. It's like, okay, if you figure out your ROCD in one relationship, that's only for that relationship. If you enter into another relationship, what you're going to find is you're going to have the same thing happen all over again. And then you're going to start to say, oh, I just have ROCD. I can't be in a relationship, right? This is exactly what I went through. What I realized was it's not about my obsessive thoughts. My obsessive thoughts are actually anxiety, right? Because the body feels something and we try to resolve it through the mind. This isn't a mental thing going on here. It's a feeling thing, right? This inner landscape that we know nothing about because we're afraid of it because it's so full. There's so much there. And we feel like we have no place to put it in this world, so we have to keep it tightened up, tied up, hidden away. It is all the same thing. And yeah, it's really wonderful that there's awareness, and it's really wonderful that people are starting to package things in ways to help us try to understand, but we're missing the mark, which is that it's all the same thing. It's all about who we are as a soul. It's all about this light inside that is just dying to burst out and to be expressed and to be fully received and fully seen and fully loved. And yet we have to understand this here in our own gut first. Feel it inside of ourselves, get to know it, explore every part of it in the most intimate ways, inside and out. And this is why it's very, very individual work. And then in this understanding we will have cultivated of what it means to bring this inner world out into the outer world. We can start to connect with others in these bountiful, meaningful ways, and we can start to build something very different than what we see and experience right now. Okay, hope that helps clarify a few things. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.